Hi, everybody. It's the Hocus Pocus podcast coming back to you with a part 2 of our Immortalist series.
To start off with the lenses, so I was focusing on the feminist lens, and basically it is when you're analyzing the book in a way that you're noticing how women are portrayed and presented in comparison to men. And so some of the main quotes that I found that helped support this is on page 226. Daniel is getting to know Ruby more because that is Claire's child and they didn't really talk much, and she talks about the struggles of women, especially in the entertainment business, as Ruby and Raj are still continuing Clara's passion and Clara's dream. And she is acknowledging this as a teenager, and in Clara's section of the book, she also acknowledged it as well, where she was saying, there are no women in Las Vegas who do magic shows, like that's unheard of, all of that. And then on page 232 is just one case of Raj being controlling of the women in his life, and he basically wants Ruby to stay in the show business forever with him because now she's interested in actually going to college and being a real person, and he's kind of holding her back, but hopefully Daniel is going to help her get out of that show with that.
To go off of Lauren's point with the feminist lens, there was a point on 240 where as though Raj and Daniel were talking about like his career or whatnot, and it was as though like Raj was kind of praised for what he did, whereas though he was like, you have a successful career, but when they were talking about Clara, I believe she was a part of the same thing he was doing, but they just kept mentioning like how she wasn't mentally right, and she was taken advantage of, and it was just like the way they were talking about her compared to Raj, even though they were both partners and they did the same thing, it just seemed like Raj was put more into a positive spotlight because he was a male. I think that they went more based off like negativity on Claire because she is a female, and I feel like they could have both been put in a positive light because, like I said, they were both doing the same thing, if that makes sense. So
I had the new historicist lens, and basically the new historicist lens emphasizes the historicity of a text by relating it to the configuration of power, society, or ideology in a certain time period. So this basically means like new historicist lens, it relates to like the societal ideas and stuff that were like present in a certain time, and this can be seen on page like 205. This is when Daniel is talking to the detective Eddie, and they're trying to like figure out why like Clara did what she did in her chapter. And in page 205, like Eddie basically brings up the fact that there's a Romani family like going around. They're called the Costellos, and like they've been running like this fortune telling ring for a long time, and the way that he just like describes them is very, you could tell that it's very like dated and just like very offensive. He even says like the word gypsies, which is like considered a slur in today's standards. And yeah, so just based off of that, you can tell that this conversation was set like in the past, just because of the discriminatory like language that Eddie kind of uses when describing them. Another example of the new historicist lens is on page 238 when Daniel is having, well, not really a conversation, he's like arguing with his brother-in-law Raj about the Iraq and like U.S. conflict and everything. And Raj basically brings up the point that there's no reason for the U.S. to still be in Iraq, and that they're only in there for oil. And like there's like no other country in the world is enthusiastic about this conflict except for Israel, who would benefit from it. And Daniel mentions how like he has his own like reservations about Zionism, and Zionism is basically a movement for the reestablishment and development and protection of Israel, and it was established as a political organization in 1897. So basically just throughout Daniel's entire part, like Chloe Benjamin uses a lot of like historical like events and evidence as a way to like kind of shape people's like conversations and like Daniel's opinions on things. And yeah, it could be seen like throughout his chapter a lot. Do you guys want to go into the Marxist lens now?
Connect with that, I guess. It's kind of hard to apply a Marxist lens to the idea, or like where they mentioned Iraq, and the whole oil thing. I did just like the idea that like Raj is also in higher economic status at this point, which is also a little ironic considering that he is not ironic, I guess. But it's like a turn of tables considering he's like an immigrant, and it's like kind of the opposite of the Ghost family who's been there longer than he has. But just like the whole idea, like he's kind of talking down to them, and he's also saying kind of not discriminatory, but just what's the word again? I guess in their minds it's like bordering on he's about to say something kind of anti-Semitic. But like outside of that, yeah, there's the whole Romani thing, and the way Daniel talks about them is like very I can't think of any words right now. But him and the cop are very like disgusted by their presence. They're like disgusted that they get money by other more traditional means, and that they're just like traveling in caravans, and like their whole practice is like really gross to them. And the way they talk about them is like there's some other species, I guess. Like he's talking about like some animal in the zoo, the way Eddie describes their like traditions to them and how they have to survive having fled from the Nazis and not been able to find like a stable position in society after this. But I mean, outside of those two things, there's also just the general differences between Raj and Ruby's family, and the fact that like in 217 they like described them as living in the mansion, and then Ruby just casually mentioned like she has a pet pony and like she would let people like play with it, and that she like brings her Louis Vuitton suitcase and she wears Uggs and like the newest like fashion like Juicy at the time or whatever. And like whenever they describe Raj and Daniel, like Raj is wearing like a new cashmere sweater, and like Daniel's like, they literally say he's like schlubby. He's like wearing moccasins and like a stained shirt. So, and which also just creates more tensions between them. So there's like this class tension of like Raj getting rich, especially using like Clara's talent, and Daniel being Jewish and Raj kind of being anti-Semitic, or at least holding anti-Semitic views.
The way the book is written, the way Chloe Simon writes the book, it doesn't have a very high view of people that hold wealth. And I think that's very evident in the relationship between Raj and Daniel, because Raj kind of shows that he has a lot of money, and it kind of creates tension between Raj and Daniel, and that's on page 217. It says in the book, and the cashmere hoodie, who would wear such a thing? So Daniel investigated. Clearly the class difference has some kind of, it highlights the impact of the class difference. And it also comes up in earlier sections with Clara. She was the happiest when she was poor and living in the trailer with Raj and Ruby, and it was just the three of them. And even Simon was broke throughout the entire thing, and he was the happiest out of all three of the children we've seen so far.
Thanks for listening. This is
Hocus Pocus!
Tune in for our next podcast.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.